screens.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with tonight's event. Our secret booksellers who are behind the scenes have put the link to tonight's book for any of you who somehow missed it in all of our missives. We are here to celebrate the brand new The Call Me Ishmael phone book, out today from Avid Reader Press and imprinted Simon & Schuster. It is written by Steph Kent and Logan Smalley, and they are here tonight with me. My name is Janet Geddis. I am the owner and founder of Avid Bookshop here in Athens, Georgia, which is Logan's hometown and one of Steph's adopted hometowns, I might venture to guess. We're going to do a sort of 3-act structure to this event. The first part, I'm going to finish welcoming you to the event and tell you a little bit about Avid Bookshop, tell you a little bit about the co-authors and a tiny bit about their project, and kind of let them take it away, and then they and I will be in conversation. Then in our second act, we're going to bring in Bertis Downs, who is the manager of the band R.E.M, a lawyer and a big supporter of local businesses, reading initiatives, public education, you name it. If it helps the community, he's behind it. So Logan and Steph especially wanted him to be the special guest tonight. So he and Logan and Steph will be talking. And then for the very end, the third act, we are going to invite all of you who are willing to show your faces back on screen. So I'll be inviting you at that point to unhide your video, but not until then. And then we're just going to have a conversation led by Steph and Logan just about books and reading, and then we'll wrap up around 8 o'clock. So thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Janet Geddis. I am the business owner of Avid Bookshop here in Athens, Georgia, although you wouldn't know I'm in Athens because I could be anywhere because of COVID. We are only able to pull off events like this because of your support, all of you attending, and people like Bertis and Logan and Steph who are supporting us. A book does not come into existence on its own. It takes an entire ecosystem, including publishers like the Avid Reader Press, which is a relatively new press. And I don't even know if Logan and Steph know that Jofi Ferrari Adler, who works at Avid Reader Press, I believe is one of the founders. When I first announced I wanted to open a bookstore one day, way before I had a store space, he ended up promoting Avid on the blog of the publisher that he wrote for at the time, or worked for. It was really awesome. Anyway, so all of us are here. We need readers, we need community members, we need authors, we need publishers, we need customers to buy their books from an independent bookstore like Avid and not from a gigantic multi-billion company that is making money after dollar. Hold on. So we are here to celebrate this book. I would like to briefly introduce each of the two authors that we have here. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to Steph Kent. Steph Kent is a writer and multimedia producer. Her recent work includes the Webby award-winning Masters of Scale podcast, the Wall Street Journal's premier mobile-first news app, and a series of book reviews for Boxing Insider. During her time on staff at TED, Steph built community programs and brand engagement strategies. She was awarded a 2017 Creative Community Fellowship with National Art Strategies Foundation and holds a BA in Playwriting and Literature from Emerson College. Stephanie writes a weekly newspaper on creativity and is a competitive boxer. You can find her online at stephkent.com. Logan Smalley is the founding director of TED's award-winning youth and education initiative, TED Ed, which creates and distributes free educational animations and programs to students and teachers around the world. Prior to working for TED, Logan was selected as a TED Fellow for his roles as director, editor, and composer in the acclaimed feature-length documentary, Darius Goes West. Many Athenians will be familiar with that. Logan began his career as a high school special education teacher in his hometown of Athens, Georgia, and holds a master's degree in technology, innovation, and education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. You can learn more about Logan and his work at logansmalley.com. So one last reminder, if you guys have just joined us, please hide your videos and mute yourselves, and we will be inviting all of you to unhide your videos and unmute yourselves in the last third of our presentation. So thank you so much. And Logan and Steph, welcome to Avid Bookshop via the internet.
Thank you. Thank you for having us,
Yeah,
Janet.
thank you. And it's so wonderful to see all of our friends. We can see all your names in the side. And as we scroll over from New York, from California, of course, from Athens. And it's just, it's very heartening. And I especially like the part where Daniel Apting, the driver from Darius Goes West, turned his video on and we actually saw him through a steering wheel somehow.
In character, always.
Thanks, Daniel.
So what, for a lot of us are familiar with your work, but can you describe the moment that the Call Me Ishmael idea came to fruition, way before it was a book, when it was just an idea to get people to share their stories about reading?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, Call Me Ishmael is the first sentence of Moby Dick. I think most people know that. It's a very famous opening line. And one day, 5 years ago, Steph and I were at a pub down the street from our apartment in New York called the White Horse Tavern. It's a pretty well-known pub, and it's very literary. Dylan Thomas, and Bob Dylan, and everybody in who's anybody hung out there, and we were just having a beer and talking about books, and we were talking about opening lines in literature, and we noticed that there was a sort of a pun embedded into Call Me Ishmael, and call me comma Ishmael 774-325-0503. What if we gave Ishmael a phone number and people could call and leave messages about books they love? So 24 hours later, after some notes on a bar napkin, we launched callmeishmael.com and sent that phone number to some of our best reader friends.
Many of whom are with us today.
Yeah, many of whom are here tonight, and many of whom are featured in the Call Me Ishmael phone book. And dozens called, then hundreds called, and we started hearing messages from people we'd never heard of and strangers. And since then, thousands and thousands of people have called. Someone's probably calling Ishmael right now and sharing a story about a book that they love. So that's how it got started.
That's awesome. So one thing that really has always struck me about you all is I've gotten to know you over the years through various projects you've had, and one thing that I love is that you're able to balance this infectious and delightful love of reading with the belief that reading can change your way, I guess, get you in touch with yourself and the people that you love, even in really dark times. So can you talk a little bit about either books or reading experiences or any sort of event surrounded by reading that has helped you maintain some kind of levity or joy, even when times are a little bit dark, like they are for most of us right now in 2020?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think one of the things that's interesting about our project is because it's anonymous, because we can kind of guess sometimes if it's a voice that we know really well on the voicemail box who it is, but
Terry Kent.
Yeah, Terry Kent, we know. But for the most part, we have no idea, and I think there's a safety in that, and it creates this space of being really vulnerable and really open. And one of the reasons that we really love the messages that we get is that you can hear so much in somebody's voice. You don't know anything about what they look like, what age they are, what gender, what they're going through, but you can feel emotion. The emotion comes across really clearly. And so a lot of the messages that we get are actually about hard times, and a good chunk of them are really dark. We have people talking about getting through depression, getting through mental illness, getting through grief and loss and death and these horrible things. But I think there's something really beautiful about finding something like a book, like a story that helps you get through something that's really hard, and being able to share it in hopes that it reaches somebody else at the right time and helps them get through something. So that's one of the things to me that's really been beautiful to watch about the project, is just that this idea that I have this book, I found this thing, I want everybody to know about it. That act of sharing is so generous and so beautiful. And I love the parts of the project that deal with that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Logan, or did she?
No, she certainly, I agree with, I double all of that, but I think that I just still am really kind of obsessed with this idea that someone somewhere else that I've never met has spent hours, probably weeks, maybe even months, reading a book and it affects them so much that they feel compelled to pick up pick up the phone, call Ishmael, and exchange, a personal story, but also just one of the most precious things in life, which is a book recommendation, right? Like if you think of everything that it takes to get to that point and do that, it's just really amazing. And we feel really lucky that people do that, and that we were able to put it in this collection, this interactive phone book for other people to discover with us.
That's awesome. So one thing that your book does is help, your book and of course the Call Me Ishmael phone project to begin with helps people feel connected to each other, like there's a sense of community even when we might be separated geographically. That being said, I know that you two are huge proponents of independent bookstores, independent businesses, and making sure that wherever you choose to make your home, that you really make a community out of it. How do you see independent bookstores and or libraries or communities really connecting with books in a way? And why is it important to you to support independent bookstores versus just buying everything you need online without any human interaction? Why does that matter for you as readers and for you now as authors and people who care about reading culture?
Oh man, I have to take this one because
it's my community.
It is.
She's in Athens.
No, so part of the book that I really got a lot of joy from and will forever get a lot of joy from is the independent bookstore interviews. So we actually interviewed one independent bookstore from every state. Janet, obviously you're familiar with this part of the project. We had a great conversation, but I actually got to talk to somebody who owns or works in an independent bookstore all across the country. And it was so interesting talking to them because I always loved bookstores. Like, who doesn't love a bookstore? But I learned so much about how they run and how they think about their community and how they serve their community. And it's like so much deeper than I had ever imagined, down to things like, there's knowing people's names and knowing what types of books you can recommend to them. Like that's, sort of basic level things, but down to like what is on their shelves. Like these bookstores, as I don't have to tell you, are really curating everything in their shop for what they know that their community likes to read. And even more than that, what they want to sort of like nudge them to go outside their comfort zone and read. Like, I think independent booksellers just have this like pulse on their community, what they're thinking about and worried about and excited about and talking about, that is a really cool way to get a sense of a place. So I think you guys are doing really important work, and it's amazing to learn about it.
Now, I'd be remiss not to add, my two.
This is the most.
Bertis is jamming out on us. Bertis,
mute yourself.
Yeah. He's watching Song Exploder, right? More on that later. But my brother, Ben Smalley, who some of you know from Athens and from Darius Goes West, and we both grew up there, and his wife, Annie Smalley, and my nieces are on the call right now. And they used to live in Atlanta, and I got nothing against Atlanta. I enjoyed visiting them there. But when they said that they were moving back to Athens, there's so many things to love about Athens, and this whole crowd knows, and I don't have to list them all. But I think one of the things that's absolutely critical to Athens is Avid Bookshop, and having a community beating heart in the middle of 5 Points now, that the community can come to, can read, can celebrate, diversity, can celebrate each other. And I guess I'll wrap this very, I could go on and on, but I think somewhere what I'm trying to say is just thank you and your team for hosting us tonight, but also for running a culture center in Athens. There can't be too many of them, and thank goodness there's yours.
Thank you. That means a lot to me, and especially now with the pandemic, there's a lot more I could ask you about how the pandemic has made you think or rethink about how you interact with the communities, but I think you answered that well. So thank you so much. And I know for a lot of people, for readers, bookstores are that place. For other people, it's the neighborhood bistro, it's the little like daily groceries, it's all these places that for them are the centerpiece of their cultural or life of where they live. So just want to encourage people that to the ability you're able to support those stores and places now, because there are a lot of us potentially going extinct, not avid so far, thanks to our customers. So I have two more things for you before we turn over to our special guest. One is for each of you, quickly, what's the very first book you called and talked to Ishmael about? And then if you were to call Ishmael tomorrow, what's a book that you would want to talk to him about?
Trying to remember the first one. I think one of my stories, I can't remember if I did it anonymously or not, but I bartended at the Globe all through college. So anyone who's from Athens will know that. And for those of you who aren't, it's just a great bar in the middle of downtown. It's more of a literary bar than some of the other bars. And especially the happy hour where I was the young bouncer for, and I got to read, that's how hard of a bouncing job it was while I was bouncing people. And I picked up Ulysses, which is famously sort of James Joyce, Ulysses, one of the more challenging books to read. And I did it because there was a poster on the wall of Ulysses quotes that was just like forcing me as I rolled napkins every night to be like, you better try and read this. And so I sort of read that night over night while I was doing some hardcore bouncing.
Yeah. So it's sort of tricky because when you start thinking about what you read in terms of Call Me Ishmael stories, like everything I read, I want to call Ishmael about. But I have to not, because who wants to listen to a project that's like all of my stories about reading? But okay, well, I'll send them to you. But I think my first one, we had this partnership with Reading Rainbow a couple years ago where invited.
This wasn't planned, I swear.
Oh,
what?
Genius.
It was from Kickstarter.
Logan taking a sweater off, not even starting to fall. It's so
only took 23 minutes. I'm impressed.
So we had to call about a book that we read as a kid, and there was this series called Dear America, and there was this Dear America that was like a diary of a young girl on the Titanic, and that book haunted and fascinated me. So I called about that one. And then what was the other half of the question? What we would call about now?
Yeah, like say tomorrow, if you were new to all this and you just heard about Call Me Ishmael, is there something you're reading right now or something that just hits the top of your head? It doesn't have to be your favorite book ever, but what's something that you just feel compelled to talk about right now?
I'm going to buy you some time
Okay.
while you think of that, because I'm going to, instead of answering it, I want everyone in the crowd here to be thinking of how they would answer that. So while Steph's brainstorming, you guys know, hopefully some of you have seen the Call Me Ishmael phone book, but the way it works is these phone listings, right? And there's a phone number, Ishmael's phone number right there. And you call and you can leave a message, or you can dial an extension and hear someone else's message. And they're expressed in lots of creative ways. And it's like the Yellow Pages, and it's just a real joy to interact with. But I think one of the coolest parts about the Call Me Ishmael phone book, and certainly what we want folks to leave with, is a sort of invitation to become a part of the story. So when you're calling and listening to people's messages, you get dropped into an answering machine that you can hang up on if you're not ready. But at some point, we hope you'll share your story about a book that you love. So there's some prompts throughout, but anyways, I think I bought you enough time there.
Yeah, I think I got one. I would probably call about the book I'm reading now, which is New York, the novel by Edward Rutherford. And it's just like a big, like 800-page thing that I never would have tackled, except for I'm home all the time and have the time for a longer book. So I think that would be my current one. Thank you for the fascination.
Got it. So hopefully everyone on this call, we would love to, at some point, when we switch gears, to see maybe some answers in the chat. Maybe we can call on some people. Be thinking of, I'll give you a prompt, call about a book that you love as it relates to story that you live, some other prompts in the book. Call about a book that inspired your career. Call about a book you read under the covers. Call about a book you were too young to read. Call about a book that made you cry. There's this is an exhaustive list. There's a lot more in there. But I guess that's a good time to transition, right, Janet?
Yes, let's do it. So we had planned on making this a super special secret guest, and then we realized that we have more people show up if they knew that Bertis Downs, who many of us are fans of.
It's not all that special, so it's hard to make.
He doesn't think, he tries to be like real cash about it. But so Bertis Downs is the manager for the band R.E.M. He has a long history of supporting local business, public education, any kind of education initiatives. So anybody who, even if you live way beyond the borders of Athens, you are familiar with his work, you've been touched by his work. So we're really happy that he's here tonight. And I'm gonna hide my video for a little bit and let Steph and Logan interact with Bertis for a bit. And I'll come back on around 7:40, 7:45, and we will interact with the audience. So welcome, Bertis.
Thank you, Jen. I figured out why I couldn't hear anybody. I put it on mute when that little bit of the Bruce Springsteen song called Pennsylvania needs.
In our conversation.
America needs Pennsylvania, and it's a 2-minute video. It's the best thing I've seen today. It was about an hour ago, and I was trying to send it to somebody off camera. And it started, I hit mute, and then I couldn't hear anybody else, and I couldn't figure out why. So,
well, breaking news, when you send anything Bruce just got his own emoji. That's how big he is.
That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty big.
Anybody seen it? It's if you like the song Streets of Philadelphia, you'll like this this video, I think.
Speaking of interesting people, Bertis, we wanted to have you on here because you support local business, but also because we're interested in what you're reading. The seeds of why I'm interested in what you're reading were sown pretty early. I was telling you about this before the call, but in my 5th grade classroom, which was April Chapman's classroom, there was a huge poster right behind my head. She was reading The Hobbit to us in front of us in her cube out in the lunchroom with shiny, happy people, mural music videos, and behind me was a famous Reed poster, an iconic Reed poster. I brought a visual aid here in case anyone hasn't seen it, but so we got, everyone will remember this poster, right? All over Athens. And then I got there's an updated version of it. I don't know if you've seen this one.
Yep, that's right. That's right. I think that's the kids from Avid.
Yeah, so that's me and Steph and the Avid gang. So we wanted to hear the story behind that poster, any updates on it, and then we want to talk to you about books. But give us some updates on that.
Well, thank you for all the generous introductions. And I do remember when we talked about 3 weeks ago, and I said, "Now, why do you want me to be on here?" I'm vaguely, I know about the project, but anyway, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm glad I am on. And it's just, I'm not at home. I'm in New Hampshire, but I'm coming home soon and to see all these names and know most of the people on the list. I'm really excited to be here. Shiny Happy People, many people don't know it, but it was kind of the most commercial song on Out of Time. Out of Time came out in 1991. So in 1990, when we had, the record was made, everybody realized it was a pretty special record. Had all these really kind of different texture songs on it. Shiny Happy People had Kate Pearson, who would make a great video with the band, be on SNL, all this like super snappy stuff that would be big, big, big. And they were already a pretty big band, but they were not like at that level of pop. People didn't know them in the grocery store necessarily outside of college towns and college radio stations and that kind of stuff. So Shiny Happy People was kind of the big song on that record. Everybody knew it. So the question was, what is your first single going to be? We didn't want Shiny Happy People to be the first single. The band is sold out. Oh my God, here, R.E.M. is, it's the silly, sappy, sing-songy song called Shiny Happy People. The band's pretty much hated it ever since they wrote it, I gotta say. They didn't put it on their greatest hits, which a lot of people were like, well, why would you put that on your greatest hits? Because it was a pretty big single. So the first single it was never gonna be Shiny Happy People. It came very close to being a song called Radio Song, which is the one they'd done with KRS-One, Chris Parker. It was one of the early days of rock bands having some hip hop stuff on it. Aerosmith had done it with Walk This Way. But to have a song like a Radio Song was kind of an obvious choice. But there was this other song that everybody realized was kind of like this really beautiful song. It wasn't really a single. I mean, it didn't have any guitar on it, literally. It was 4.5 minutes long. It kind of barely had a chorus. And it was called Losing My Religion. But we thought that's the song to put out because it's kind of this is who we are. This is our statement song. And we know that became a big hit. Shiny Happy People came out. A few other songs came out. A year later, Automatic came out with a bunch of big songs on it. So Shiny Happy People, to answer your question, was a song that everybody had kind of mixed feelings about. They knew it was a good song. They liked it when they wrote it. They don't mind it, but it just kind of came across in a certain lightness and levity that wasn't necessarily their strongest suit or something they most wanted. They rarely played it live, ever, really.
So what about
video?
the
Yeah, that was done because I guess pardon me.
What about the Reed poster though? What's the story behind the Reed poster?
So the Reed poster was well, the Reed poster, my memory of that is that the American Library Association had a campaign going, and it was pretty early days of the campaign. I may be wrong, maybe it was the 20th year, but it seems to me like it was fairly early, and they wanted somebody who would appeal to the younger generation. And so they got this, roughly 30-year-old band called R.E.M. to do a Reed poster. The guys looked at it and they were like, sure, okay. They just finished a tour, the Green World Tour. They were all pretty literate guys. I mean, all of them read a lot. And so the idea was you can put any book you want, put it in your lap and pose for us. We'll have this photographer come over. I can't remember who picked photographer. It was somebody named Tom Hill from Atlanta. We've recently been in touch with him again. I'll tell you why in just a minute. And so I remember that they spent a day doing it. So last time we thought about it, it came out, people really liked it. A lot of librarians, a lot of teachers. I don't know how people got it. It wasn't ever for sale, I don't think. But I guess they got it through the American Library Association. It was before we had a website. It was, just a different world. But that was the Reed poster. Newsflash, in case you haven't heard about it, it's being made into a puzzle. It seemed like an image that would lend itself well to a good puzzle. Turns out there's a very good puzzle company in Athens, Georgia. I didn't know about them, but a lot of people do. And they are making it into a 1,000-piece puzzle that's evidently a particularly hard kind of puzzle. And it will be coming out roughly Christmas time, but this is the week to order. People are going on the website and they are ordering. I wish more people would, because we'll make more puzzles, and all the money is going to Books for Keeps and the American Library Association. They're letting us do it again. The photographer was very gracious. We're going to send him one or two. And otherwise, people can buy them. And a decent amount of money goes between the two groups. That's the puzzle. And then the video was made at Georgia Theater. April Chapman brought her fifth graders. I think you were a year off that class, a year younger, right?
Grade.
Just missed it.
We're only in fourth grade. The fifth graders got to go, and it survived the move to the new school. Scarlett Dunn, who's recently retired as the teacher, made a point of bringing that mural from the old school that was being torn down to the new school, so it's still there now. And it's pretty neat. John Lindley was the guy doing the organ grinder or the bicycle thing, whatever.
Nice.
And yeah, that was a lot of fun. Good memory.
That's awesome. Well, I know my brother, we're watching the chat, everyone too. So if you guys have any questions for Bertis, we can try and co-moderate here. I know my brother will be happy with all those updates you just had, because he oversees social studies curriculum for the county. So he gets to go to the new Oglethorpe Elementary and see those murals. And puzzle news is huge news for my two nieces. They're puzzle masters. So
makes great Christmas presents.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely.
All right. So you have the Call Me Ishmael phone book.
I do.
You checked it out. The question is clear. Bertis, who would you call Ishmael about? What book would you call Ishmael about? It could be one, two.
People always ask me my favorite R.E.M. song. I can't give you one. I could, I guess, but I give you a few. The books that I just put it on a text to you guys tonight. The books I think I would focus on would be like an early book that really meant a lot to me before I ever had kids, up at this same place in New Hampshire, more than 30 years ago, probably in the 80s, somewhere in the mid 80s. I read a book. It turns out I didn't know anything about the writer. I don't think I've ever read any other of his books, but it's the first book by William Styron. It's called, I believe it's his first book. I think he wrote it when he was at Washington and Lee. It's called Lie Down in Darkness. And it's about a father who's getting older. And I was not yet. I was still not a father, and I was getting older, but I was still young. And it's a really sad book. And I've never gone back and read it again, but I would. It's called Lie Down in Darkness, and it just affected me. I mean, it was one of those books that I literally kind of slowed down toward the end. I just didn't, once I'd finished reading it, I kept thinking about it, and I kept wanting to read it, even though I'd finished it, and it was sad. And then more recently, I don't know, I don't read very fast, and I often get so wrapped up in being on these damn screens all the time, whether they're on mute or dinging or whatever. It's hard to get away to read books, but then I go through these periods where I kind of hibernate and I read a few books in a week. And I have done that a lot this summer. I think I've read a bunch this summer. I guess more fiction than anything, but a lot of historical fiction, a lot of things about just weirdly books that I've kind of gravitated toward have been, I read a book recently called The Dutch House by that author who owns the bookstore in Nashville. I always get it mixed up with the other Anne or Annie. Is it Ann Patchett?
Yeah.
Owns the bookstore in Nashville, and she wrote a book called The Dutch House. And it's very, I don't guess it's autobiographical. That's just a straight novel, but it's various generations. It's all about this particular house in outside of New York, I think. Anyway, it's a really intense book.
Love that book in the comments.
Yeah, and I kind of, you know, I got real involved in it. And I also immediately started thinking about Catherine's mom, who's in her 90s, and our kids, and people getting older, and when they die, and what happens to the property, and all that kind of stuff. And that ended up being the theme of a few books I read this summer. There were a bunch of books that kind of had that as a theme. And then the other book that's really meant a lot to me in the last few years, and Janet Geddis knows this because I bought a bunch of copies when it came out. But I'm kind of a pop, you know, I don't necessarily like the most obscure things. I like things that end up being hits because they're really good. I really liked All the Light You Cannot See, and I've certainly seen the influence that book has had, and the way he built it, and the way it, you know, finally came together, and little tiny chapters. And I see other books that kind of feel like they're keeping that one in mind. But I love that book. I can't wait for it to be made into a movie. I think I heard it is being made into a movie.
I heard that too. Yeah.
Steph and I both read that one.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Bertis? How do you decide what you're going to read next?
Somewhat randomly. I try to keep up with reviews of people. I mean, authors I like a lot. Like I really like that guy, Eric Larson, who's about my age and who seems to have a method where he gets really interested in something, moves there for a couple of years, and writes a book while he's there. I don't know. For some reason, his stuff, the most recent, I read that Churchill book right at the beginning of the pandemic up here at Squam. I read that, the book, The Splendid and the Vile by Churchill. And, you know, I've never been a Churchill aficionado. I was a history major, but I did more American history. I felt like I knew a lot about World War II, but I sure knew a lot more about London, which is a town I love. And I really loved the one he wrote on Berlin as well. That's another city that I really, in Europe, I really love Berlin. I've spent a lot of time there. So I decided what I want to read. Sometimes it's as random as what's next on my list, or sometimes it's something somebody recommended, or occasionally somebody sends me something and I'll read that.
Browsing.
But I end up having a bunch more books that I want to read than that I actually get around to reading. I imagine most of us are like that, but I don't have an ordered system.
Bertis,
Okay.
Those are great answers, but the future answer is browsing through your Call Me Ishmael phone book. You got 1,000 book recs, 7 plus 4 digits away. Did you respond to anything in the phone book?
Yeah, well, what I was doing, it's funny. I was mainly, this is weird. This is probably a psychological study, like a Rorschach test. It's probably going to show that I'm really high on various scales. But what I did is I tried to make sure that some of the books I've read are actually in your book, and I was very comforted to see.
Oh, nice. What do we got?
I was really happy to see that. I also saw a lot of books that I read the Cliff Notes to in college. With that, I was a history major. I was not an English major. I'm not proud of that. But, you know, I was in college. I had other more important things to do, and I needed to make at least an A- or a B+ on an essay exam. So
Sure.
you can, you know, that's the way I was then. If I was in college now, I would not be that way, I promise. Would you like to hear the worst book I ever read?
Yes.
It'll probably really piss somebody off in the comments, and if so, that's fine. We can talk about it.
All right.
We were on tour, and it was finally kind of a day off, and I was going to be able to kind of like, I went somewhere remote from the tour. I sat by a pool, and I read this book like from dusk to dawn. And about halfway through it, I called Bob Carson. Some of y'all will know Bob Carson. In fact, Logan Smalley knows him well, Andrew Carson's father. And he'd given it to me at Christmas. And so I had taken it with me. It was fairly thin. I read some books lately. They're a lot thicker than that one. That was not that intimidating of a book to get into. I started reading it. And I read a while. It was pretty depressing. I read a bit more. So about maybe 2/3 of the way through the book, I'm always at the point like, when do you give up on a book? I rarely give up on a book. I rarely quit reading a book. I'll go ahead but after about 2/3 of the book, I called Bob and I said, man, does this get any better? And he goes, well, how far have you gotten? And I said, I don't know. I'm like on page 170 or something. And he goes, No, it's pretty much like that all the way through. Well, I finished it. It's okay. And some people I know love The Road. And I kept wondering what I was missing. But that book just was so dark and so depressing. I mean, I didn't find anything in it. I wouldn't necessarily want to run back and read that one again, but maybe I should.
My memory of that book was sitting in Starbucks, and I got to the last page and I was like crying to the point of one of the baristas came up to me with a tissue and was like, "Are you okay?" Like that book killed me.
It's very dark. I haven't read The Road, but I read Blood Meridian. I would recommend it. I thought it was.
Is that by Cormac McCarthy as well?
Same.
Okay, well, I'll try to that one. I know he's an amazing writer. I've read some of his shorter stuff, New Yorker and stuff. I'll go. So Blood Meridian is one worth checking out.
I think so.
Just lighter than The Road.
The bad guy in it is the sinister is just overwhelming.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll read that one.
And also, for everybody watching, the Avid Bookshop group is doing a great job of very rapidly finding the links to every book that's mentioned. So if you hear something that sounds interesting, make sure you pick up a book from them.
Yes, and if you finish the book and you love it, what should they do?
Call and tell somebody about it.
Yeah, that's right. We're I think we got a couple more minutes. So you talked about reading on the tour. Tell us some more. We just watched Song Exploder today. For anybody out there who doesn't know, there's a great episode on Song Exploder on Netflix about R.E.M. But I'm curious, what is the reading habit on the road in general across the band? Tell us about, rock and roll and reading.
Okay, I will come to that question in a minute. I'll work through the answer to that question in my head while I'm answering this. The last question, there's two other books I really want to mention, because I've been trying to do my homework right now. One of the things that we're all focused on, which is inequity and race, and particularly those of us that were born on third base, whether we realize it or not, or whatever the exact variations of our individual lives, the structural racism that exists in our society. And so I've for years been kind of interested in that. I worked in the Fulton County Jail when I was a freshman in college. I worked in a prison when I was in college. And I always wanted to go into legal aid and legal services, but I ended up doing what I'm doing. But I've always kind of been acquainted with and thinking through those issues. So the two books that I'd say the most important to me, I've read some of the stuff that's come out recently. It's hard to keep up with it. My daughter, Addie, who's studying to be a teacher, is reading all of it. She's like, she could do an entire phone book just on the books she's read, like a lot of people. But I finally got around a book that I'd had for several years and never had read. I finally read Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad, and then I ended up picking up Nickel Boys and reading that one, the most recent one. And the guy's such an amazing writer. And it's the first time I've ever myself kind of felt like what it must have felt like to have to live with that as your reality every day. I know I've known it. I know I've thought about it. I know I've studied it. I know I've argued against it. But that was to me a really eye-opening book. And then the other one, kind of in that same category, I read about 5 or 6 years ago. This is another one that I ordered a few copies from Janet of and gave away. But it was written by a white guy from North Carolina, but he's got a really interesting story. At 11, he witnessed a horrible race murder. This is a book called Blood Done Sign My Name. Blood Done Sign My Name by Tim Tyson, or he goes by Timothy Tyson. He's a professor, get this, at both Duke and Carolina. I can't remember which one. He's mainly at one, but he's also at the other one. And he's one of William Barber's main aide-de-camps. Whatever's coming from William Barber, Tim Tyson has a lot, he's part of very much his close inner circle. So Tim Tyson at the age of 11 witnessed this race murder. His dad was a preacher. It was in the town of Oxford, North Carolina. It was right at the time, he's almost exactly my age. So this would have been like, I think when he was in about whatever you are at 11, would have been in the mid 60s, when somebody in a store killed a black guy, got away with it. It was never even really all that much in doubt that he was going to ever pay the price for having murdered a human being. So Tim Tyson has spent his life reflecting on that. He wrote this memoir, kind of tying in that personal experience as a little boy with the history of our country and what he's ended up doing as a professor in academics. And it's just to me, it was a book I could really, really relate to, and I've recommended it widely. Okay. What does the band do when they read on the road? I don't really talk about their personal stuff, but I will say they all read a lot. I mean, they all, first of all, we haven't been on the road in so long. The last R.E.M. tour was in 2008. It was 4 elections ago. That was a long time. It was Obama's first. We were in Santiago, Chile, when we got the news that Obama had won. And everybody was in Grant Park, Chicago, and we got the news. The band was on stage. They came out and they played Radio Free Europe, which is the only time they played it in years, and they played I Believe, and it was pretty celebratory to feel them getting to play that song on stage in front of the first of 2 nights in Santiago, Chile. But I mean, they read on the bus, they read on the plane, they read when they can. Among the other stuff they're doing, when they're not too tired or getting over a show. But like I say, they haven't been on the road in 12 years, so I barely remember.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bertis. I wanted to actually use one of your recommendations, the Underground Railroad, to demonstrate to anybody how the Call Me Ishmael phone book works. So you'll see at the top here, there's just like the phone books of old, there's creative categories on every page, including states and all sorts of different stuff. And one of the categories is required reading. And so what that implies is that anyone who calls in this section is going to have somehow told their story about a book where it should be required reading or some play on that. And so somebody called. I actually haven't listened to this recently. There's thousands of calls, so I can't recall exactly what it's about, the story that the caller left, but it's Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. And so the way that the phone book works is you can do this now, by the way, or at 8 o'clock when we hang up. You would dial 774-325-0503, which is Ishmael's number. You can call that anytime. And then you would dial the extension 2772. And you would hear what somebody else had to say about Colson Whitehead. And there's a million different ways in the book to experience, interactive calls and stuff like that. But if you want to hear someone, in addition to Bertis, recommending that book and why it should be required reading, this phone book can do that. Janet.
Yeah, I'm back. And I invite Bertis and, of course, Logan and Steph to stay on. In a minute, we're going to, not yet, but we're going to invite you to show your video in a second. I wanted to say a couple things real fast before we do that. One of them is, Bertis, when you mentioned how you go through patterns of reading, sometimes you read 3 books in a week, sometimes you're in a lull. I think a lot of people get easily dissuaded when that happens, and they feel like, oh God, I thought I was a reader and I haven't been able to pick up a book in months, especially now when we're in political turmoil and the world is crazy. Like, it makes sense. I own a bookstore. I've been reading the same novel for like 3 weeks. But 2 months ago, I was reading like a book a day. So it just goes in patterns. It goes in waves. So I don't think you're being hard on yourself. But for anybody on the call who's like, oh my God, people are talking about books.
It goes with mood swings. And when I'm feeling down and not feel like turning the computer on, I read books, and it helps get me out of them. And when I get busy, one word for it, hectic, I don't have time to read books. So.
Yeah, amen. I hear that. I also want to point out, in case I forget to, that while this book is so much fun for people who are obsessed with books, it's also such a wonderful invitation for people who are just getting into reading, whether you're 3 years old or 110 years old, because it sort of invites this sense of curiosity and exploration. So I actually messaged, I have one of my teachers here from high school. I messaged my AP English teacher telling him how this reminds me of the daily literary illusion exercises we would do in his class every day. So it's really great for those people who are obsessed with illusions, but it's also such a fun and curious way to sort of get involved and understand why bibliophiles have become the way they do. So I don't want people to be intimidated if they're not already huge readers. You're still gonna love this book. So at that, I would love for everybody who's willing to show their faces to go ahead. Don't unmute yourself, but do show your video. And then if Logan and Steph invite you to talk or call on you, you can unmute then. And that way we won't have any visual noise, auditory noise getting things a little loud on here. So look at all these faces. So I'm gonna give it over to Logan and Steph until right before 8 o'clock when we formally close the event. So Logan and Steph, this is your show. Feel free to take control of this eager audience and call on people that will.
So nice to see everybody.
Yeah, it's
Thank
so
you
good to
so
see
much.
everybody.
We've spent a very small part of the last couple of days feeling a little bit sad that we couldn't be in person celebrating this with everybody, but this is a very close second next best thing. So it's really nice to see everybody.
Excellent. So we actually have 2 pages of people, which is such a compliment. It's also hilarious that our neighbor, who's literally 14 feet
I know,
from
Andrew,
us,
you should come over
is,
here.
is tuning in. Hey, Mo. So many of you made this book possible. So even if we don't get through a bunch of stories, but we are looking for a brave volunteer who would like to do basically, you know, a little impromptu call me Ishmael call. Pretend like you're calling Ishmael and letting all these nice people who are listening in and eavesdropping on your phone line what book to read. You might have to. How can we do this stuff?
I don't know, maybe let us know in the Zoom if you have one, and
Yeah,
we'll
give us a
confirm from there.
little thing in the Zoom. I feel like the default is Nick Waldrop or Mayor Heidi Davidson, right?
Or a question too.
She's always ready.
We can take questions too if everybody's warming up on book stories.
Oh yeah, okay. You get one more reset to think about the books. Any questions? You can drop them in the. Oh wow, I see Barbara nominating Lucy Smalley to talk about books she loves. That's the default. Nick, you're out. Lucy, you're in. Does anyone have any questions for Steph or I about creating the book? Feel free to just, you know, we thought we could kind of do raise hands, but there's actually 2 pages of people here.
Yeah,
so there's
so I
no
think the chat
possible way. So
is the
chat's
way to
the way,
go.
and then we'll call on you. Can you talk a bit about the design process?
Yes.
Yes, Steph.
Yeah, the design process was really interesting because we had, well, oh man, it's sort of unreachable right now, but we have a large collection of old telephone books that were really hard to find. They actually don't really make them anymore. So first we went about collecting old telephone directories just to see how they were laid out, see the types of ways that people would use them, look at the kinds of categories that are in old phone books. And that was really the inspiration. So when we started thinking about how to explain the idea of the book, hi, Mr. Potato Head, what's happening? We started mocking it up to look like that. And really, it was kind of a mixed process of figuring out the design and figuring out the content together, because we were sort of designing the layout while we were figuring out what would actually be in the book. So we did a lot of brainstorms. A lot of people on this call actually came over to our house one morning and helped us think about what a literary phone book could be. But once we kind of got into that idea of what the layout would be like, we knew that we wanted to have listings. So that was a pretty clear way to represent the stories. We knew that we needed to have adverts in some way. So pretty quickly came on to the idea of like, what could be silly bookish style adverts, and had a fun couple of brainstorms about that. And then, it sort of evolved from there. So we worked with our publisher is Avid Reader Press, and their team is so creative and wonderful and helped us design our beautiful cover. That's another fun homage to the old phone books. And they helped us make sure that the idea kind of came to life and looked great. So that's an overview.
I kind of want to, we got another fiery hot question that I'll let you brainstorm on. But one funny part about the design process, to the point about not being able to find phone books, we live in the middle of Manhattan. Surely there's a phone book here. We called everywhere. We even went to AT&T stores was like the last resort. It's like, maybe they still have those. They had all been stolen from the New York Public Library. Yeah. All the phone books, like people go there and just take them and do something with them. And the only way we got our hands on them was Steph's godmother, who may or may not be on this call. I actually haven't scanned it, has a pizza joint in New Jersey. So we had to go across the water. And then we went into the pizza joint and they had all of the phone books. Yeah, like it was the mother load of all phone books. And so we just, came back with a big trash bag full of phone books and used them as inspiration. What's the
biggest disagreement?
Yeah, I was trying to think.
I don't, this isn't really a disagreement, but Logan's a really harsh editor. We kind of got into like a working system where like I would do the first draft, and he has such a good eye for detail. So I think like sometimes like not even a disagreement, but he catches every typo, everything that could be like a tighter word. Man, sometimes when you're tired and grouchy, you don't
I
want to be
totally
edited.
disagree, and I thought that answer could have been a lot shorter and a lot more punctuated. No. I'll tell you one thing we didn't disagree about. Whose name's first? Stephanie Kent, for a reason. She totally crushed this book. I did not contribute, but like, this is Stephanie Kent's Call Me Ishmael phone book. And we're so stoked that all, if not most, if not all of you have a copy. We hope you'll get copies for your friends too.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll get them at Avid Bookshop.
Yes.
There's another, this is a cool To Kill a Mockingbird story.
Yeah.
I think we can share that.
Yeah.
This is like, maybe doesn't go off this call, but you know.
You can't say that, hey, Logan. You can't say that on the internet. This is
That's one of the greatest lawyers of
the New York Times tomorrow. You can't say something like that's off the record. Mark Meadows found out about that last week.
Yeah.
Nothing is off the record when it's being said in public. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fair. This isn't juicy. It's not news. It was. I'll bear the risk.
Okay.
But remember, it's her phone book. So basically, we had this amazing early call. There's a couple of early calls that were really amazing, and I want to shout out to Tim Johnson, who's on the call, and certainly invited a bunch of you here tonight because he's one of the first people who called. But someone else called about To Kill a Mockingbird
By Harper Lee.
Yeah, and it was before Harper Lee had passed away, and it was before the sequel,
Go Set a Watchman.
Go Set a Watchman had come out. So right, like rewind yourself to that time, and we launched a phone number into the world that had an answering machine that connected to a fictitious character from the 1800s, and we're hoping random strangers would call it and leave compelling messages about a book they love so we could share it on the internet. Like, weirdest project ever. We admit it. It's so weird. And who do we hear? We get one call about To Kill a Mockingbird. We share it online. It gets a few thousand views, and we get an email from Harper Lee's agent that says, Harper Lee saw this story and she totally loved it. And we were like, oh, we retire, we quit. And it was the most amazing, like we printed out the email, we texted my mom, Barbara Smalley, who's on here somewhere, because she's a writer too. And we're like, guess who indirectly gave us a compliment? So pretty cool. I think Bertis, we're risk-free there, right?
No, I mean, what's wrong with that? That's a great story. I would think Harper would be happy about that if she's looking down from.
Thanks for this sound legal advice.
No, I think it's definitely a juicy story. I think you ought to tweet it out.
Yeah.
Is there, I wasn't looking.
Yeah, was there a book you were surprised to get a call about? Yeah. I mean, I'm always surprised, or maybe not anymore, but we get a lot of calls about reference books, like textbooks, atlases, dictionaries. And the first couple, I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. But they're actually like kind of universally our best calls. Like, they're so interesting. Like, when somebody really has an emotional attachment to a reference book, it's really cool.
Is it listed references? I feel like everyone
I don't think
should.
we have a references section.
Oh, it's Heartbreak.
Yeah, we have a Heartbreak.
I'm going to give you guys the dictionary extension. Go ahead, keep going.
So I think those are surprising, but they've also kind of taught me that you never, like, now it's to the point that nothing surprises me, like what someone is able to bond with a book over because it comes into their life at exactly the right time. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a Pulitzer Prize winning piece of literature or if it's a YA book that, snobs are not into. Like, any book can hit the right person at the right time and be really beautiful and meaningful.
Janice has given us the 7:05. So
I think that's 8:05 unless somebody's in Chicago.
Oh, that's right, 8:05. We can go 5 minutes long, and we won't be sad we will be sad if you hang up, but we won't hold it against you. I promised the dictionary extension. So this is in the category of heartbreak. Here's what the page looks like. And so there's, I don't know, 5 or 6 calls. One of them is about the dictionary. So again, to access it, you would dial 774-325-0503. And then the extension for that story is 7041. It's a really amazing story. I'm trying to think of a call that I was surprised to get about. Another one, one of my favorite calls, which I'm not going to look up because is what's it called? The anatomy, the Atlas of Human Anatomy. So it's another textbook, but it's a beautiful story about a student and their teacher gave them their copy of the class's textbook, which was just a very symbolic gesture of the teacher appreciating the budding artist's skills, because it's a how to draw book. It's the anatomy of, or sorry, the Atlas of Human Anatomy. So it's just like one of those stories of like, you know, a master artist supporting a budding artist at the perfect time, and like it meaning everything to them, and now they've become a professional artist. So it was pretty awesome to capture that story.
Yeah. All right, from Amanda, what's your favorite section in the book? You could each recommend one section for someone to call all the extensions. What would it be?
I feel like you're gonna steal mine.
Is yours pigs?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way that we came up with the list of extensions is we went back through and listened to all of the thousands of calls and just sort of started making notes of like, how would I tag that? How would I categorize that? So at first we had a list of like 500 categories. I think it ended up being like 200-ish, but some of them were really crazy. We just didn't know how many we'd need. We didn't know how many would be in each section, but there was this one tag that kept coming up, and it was pigs. Like, we just have tons of calls about books that have to do with pigs. Sounds ridiculous. It's my favorite section. It's so interesting and silly, but also like really amazing, wonderful works of literature in there. And then we also were able to find a bookstore to feature in that section that's called the Flying Pig Bookshop. And it's an independent bookstore in Vermont, I believe. And the owner is lovely. So, man, the pig section is strong.
Yeah. One thing, I know everyone's from all over. One thing is that a lot of the parts of the phone book are updatable. So I hope, you know, I'm not trying to just like sell you on it. You already have the book. Sign up for our newsletter, because we're going to be updating some of the audio with different interviews over time. So we want it to be a living book that continuously sort of recommends or helps you discover a unique, you know, little corners of the book world. So yeah, I was going to say pig. So
Yeah.
I don't know. No, I actually do have a quick answer. It's not, I couldn't figure out what the tag is called, but we got a lot of calls about the natural world and sort of nature books, and they're absolutely incredible. You might think this is only fiction calls. There's actually a lot of nonfiction in the book for anyone who's interested. Of course, there's more fiction, but there's some really awesome calls about science books. One I would highlight, if you have the book, is go listen to the one about the oldest living things on earth by Rachel Sussman. It's my favorite call. I listen to it kind of like if I'm feeling stressed out, I'll go and listen to that one. It's probably in the section time, that one.
Yeah, we have a section called time. I think it's environment.
Environment, yeah.
Any other questions? Someone's asking me, what's the dictionary for reference again?
Oh, I'll find it.
Yeah. Anybody reading anything good?
No, we gotta put Nick Waltrip on the spot. I feel like the crowd wants someone to share a story about a book they love. Nick? Do you want to vote Nick?
Yeah.
Or Ben?
Nick just gave a thumbs up.
All right, y'all. This is we'll take final words after Nick, but Nick, thank you for being brave.
No problem. Hey, Ishmael. You know, I've been reading this book lately. I do have a passion for history. I think it's great to read on your own about history, because you get to learn a little bit more about the nooks and crannies of life and someone else's life. And I was reading a book about Abraham Lincoln, and I didn't realize that he was a vampire hunter. And I thought that was, you know, we didn't get taught that in school, and I thought that was really important to kind of learn. And that's something that you can take with you, that not only was he a great man for our country, but also for the world and the evil demons beyond the world. So that's something that really touched me, and I hope you guys can share that. Thanks, Ishmael.
That's brave. If anyone doesn't know, that's a really wonderful book, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, classic. I'm sure Janet and team will
link in the chat if you want to learn about the other side of Abraham Lincoln, the lesser known.
And Nick did a great job ending it on this concept that there is a full spectrum of stories. We have lighthearted stories like that. Another one that I want my nieces to listen to is Pajama Time before they go to bed. There's a great story about pajama time. We love you, Lucy and Laney. And then to follow up on the question about Merriam-Webster Dictionary, on the other side of the spectrum of emotion that books can do is heartbreak. So Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Everyone, before you go to bed, dial 774-325-0503. That's Ishmael's number. You always start with that. And the extension is 7041 for a story of heartbreak. And it's heartbreaking for us to leave you all, but Janet, I suppose you probably need the final word, right?
I don't need it, but that's the pattern.
Yeah.
You guys can sneak one in as soon as I'm done talking.
Yeah, back
the
to
end.
you.
Thank you everybody for being here. It's such a joy to see friends new and old gathering. I don't want you to underestimate how important it is that you showed up for Steph and Logan tonight. For anybody who has a first-time book, let alone a book coming out in the midst of a pandemic when they can't see you in person and give you a hug and we can't cheer for them, this is no substitute for being able to see each other in person, but it really means so much to us and to them that you took the time to be here and show your faces and ask questions and be involved. So thank you so much. I'll be sending out a newsletter in a few minutes that has links to all the books that we talked about. So if you don't know how to save the chat or you didn't get a chance to look at all the links that we included, you will be getting an email newsletter from us. We are available all the time at avidbookshop.com, Instagram, social media. Steph and Logan are also around through their website and their social media profile. So if you have any bookish needs of any kind, please reach out to us. And thank you again to our featured authors and our featured guests for being here tonight. And thanks to all of you for making this a really memorable and lovely evening.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Janet. We appreciate you and your team.
And
thank
Bertis,
you, Rachel.
And Rachel, you guys it was great to get the band back together for a minute. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great night, and we'll be emailing you soon.
See y'all soon.
See ya.